Hello, on this rainy evening that I'm recording this because I wanted to finally get something off my chest that has been on my mind for ages. In this episode of Author Talks, I am Thomas Wrightson, an author who talks and who likes Japanese media. It is no secret that I like it. If you go back over my socials, some of the influence on the two books I've published, you will see a bit of a Japanese flair, whether anime or video games. And there is nothing that infuriates me more than localization gaffes or changes that do not make sense. If anyone who knows Pokemon knows the Jelly Donuts theme. That's because the rice cake things that were originally in the Pokemon anime were not localized as such. The localization was very American. This was the days when dying in Yu-Gi-Oh! Was being taken to the Shadow Realm. This was the day when cigarettes and blood and blades and guns were censored out of One Piece. This was the day when getting something like Ghost in the Shell without alterations was a borderline miracle. And it's also the time that meant that when Hayao Miyazaki was told that a certain company was going to be localizing his film and was proposing cuts, as it happened with Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, he allegedly sent a katana to that company with a single note: no cuts. But there are two instances of localization that come to mind immediately when I think about it in terms of video games. One that's interesting because it changes some of the context in a way that doesn't harm the story. One that is just infuriating because it does make the story borderline incomprehensible. So let's go through this in order of frustration levels from highest to lowest. Beginning with...
It's beginning. The feast at the end of time. The last revelry to say farewell. The people here know that it's almost over.
Yeah. Only 13 days to go.
Now, let me be clear about one thing. I really like the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy's story. Final Fantasy XIII was my introduction to the series. It holds a very special place in my heart. But I also think that the localization of Lightning Returns, the final entry, was absolutely butchered. The original translator, Tom Slattery, that worked on 13 and 13.2 was not brought back. Instead, it was handled by a group that I only relatively recently found out was related to the localization of Final Fantasy XV, which also had its own cases of localization butchery. The main thing that happened in Lightning Returns is not only did they make the cult and the religious mythological elements surrounding the god Bunavelze very Judeo-Christian, when the original mythos is nothing of the kind, it's a pantheon. They also completely bungled some of the terminology. Now, to simplify what is an admittedly rather convoluted aspect of the Fabula Nova Crystallis lore on which the 13 universe is based, humans have two parts to their self: a heart of chaos that provides their emotions and their self, and an immortal soul of crystal. The soul resides inside the heart. The problem is, in the English version of Lightning Returns, the terms heart and soul are basically interchangeable, and actually mostly the term heart isn't used in relation to a heart of chaos. In 13.2, the term heart in Japanese, kokoro, is substituted for the English word spirit, so people have a soul and a spirit, which is a little harder to distinguish, but is still distinct. That's the final Tom Slattery translation in this whole thing. So, yeah, that crucial aspect of the lore that makes several of the ending scenes for Lightning Returns make sense is just completely missing. It also makes elements of the character development completely miss, I mean, not that Lightning Returns has perfect character development, absolutely not. It's more that elements that would have made some of the story bits impactful, and do make it impactful in Japanese, just sound like a confusing mess in English. It also means that the key plot points surrounding the character Padra Suyul, that while her soul is eternal and reincarnates, her heart, rather than dissolving into the sea of chaos as other hearts do, linger as their own personality and have become this great cancerous mass that indirectly caused the events of 13.2, that plot point is completely lost. I am pleased that the localization of Final Fantasy has improved a lot since 15. 15, I think, was the bottom of the barrel when it comes to localization, being faithful to the Japanese while also taking into account that there are aspects of the Japanese language and nuances of their story writing that just don't translate very well into English. It's something that I would hope might get addressed in some kind of redo of the story, or some re-translation, re-localization work that might happen for a theoretical remaster/remake. I just know that the localization team that was working on Lightning Returns did not have access to the right materials, and so by doing what they did with the sweeping changes they enacted, and also the weird choice of having two different voice actors for the character of Hope and Bunvelze, they're sort of interlinked, when in the original they're the same voice actor, and that's a plot point during the final section. Yeah, that's a case of choices for the English version actually doing a disservice to the narrative. It also does a disservice to the characters, it does a disservice to the world building, to the lore, and makes a story that is already a bit difficult to follow because of how non-linear and dense it is, borderline impossible. You know. So, some of the criticisms of Lightning Returns, completely valid. A lot of them stem from this butchered localization. There's also the fact that you can really tell that the actors are sometimes having to struggle with the script they were given, and I know these people can put out great performances. I have heard them performing scripts that they are actively enjoying. The original 13, 13.2, Last of Us, the various Mass Effects, the Xenosaga games, all the actors in these various roles that they've played, especially the three lead ones, Ali Harris, Troy Baker and Laura Bailey, they can put in great performances when they're invested, when they're there, when they're with it. And it really feels like the Lightning Returns script was a bit subpar, and they were doing it, partly at least, more as a job. I'm sure they had genuine love for the characters as well, but, you know. And now onto something of a palate cleanser, and one that's actually very interesting, because the reason it happened wasn't due to any localization mismatch, but due probably to not wanting to get in trouble with the West. And considering the game it's related to, they needed all the help they could get.
You murderous savage.
Savage. I think you mean in toner.
Drakengard, aka Dragon Dragoon, is a series that I love, unironically. It has a huge amount of problems, and its sister series Nier is way more popular because primarily of Nier Automata, and then the Nier Replicant Remaster and Nier Reincarnation, even though it isn't around anymore because it's a mobile game, and Nier Automata anime, and Nier this, Nier that, maybe a Nier 3, I don't know, we may never get it. I hope Yoko Taro does something new, or maybe a new Drakengard. I'm getting off topic. Accord! I need help. Could you, put me back on track, perhaps?
Sorry, but I'm not that talented.
Oh well, I guess I have to put myself back on track. So, Drakengard and the Gods. God. Gods? God? Yeah. That's the point. There is no confirmation of why the changes were made to Drakengard's script. In many other respects, it is very faithful to the Japanese original, but there are indications in the localization culture of the time, which for the most part was pretty wary of putting anything remotely Judeo-Christian in there. In the original Japanese script, allowing for some translation variances and Japanese nuances, the deity that is basically responsible for the misfortunes of the Drakengard universe is a god with a capital G. Basically, all the torments that are suffered by the characters are the direct or indirect results of this god trying to erase humanity because their egos make them uncontrollable. Relatable. And one of the instruments alongside dragons are beings known as angels. Tenshi. Now you may be wondering, angels? Angels? They weren't in the first Drakengard. Those things were called grotesqueries or watchers. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the point. That's the English words for them. The most common English word in Drakengard and in Drakengard 2 was watchers, which actually is an interesting way of preserving the original, because watchers are a class of angel in some Judeo-Christian / Abrahamic groupings. So in using the term watchers, they were actually preserving it without being too on the nose about it. Angels and our somewhat archaic spelling demons come back into focus for Drakengard 3, which was localized by a different group / company and is very faithful to the original Japanese in many respects. There are some nuances of character that don't translate very well over, particularly surrounding the character of Zero, but that element is there. But it keeps something that the original localization of both Drakengard 1 and 2 did, which was pluralizing. God became the gods. Instead of a singular god that was sending trials to the humans, it's a pantheon of gods that are set against them. It's actually interesting because it doesn't change much about the story, if anything at all. The only thing it does is distance it a little from stuff that was quite sensitive. Although, considering how many taboo topics certainly the original Drakengard stepped into, yeah, kind of like trying to put out a oil inferno with a bucket of water. There are some interesting elements and niceties to the localization. I mean, a lot of people will say that the English version completely censored out XYZ, but the Japanese version, for some of the stuff it talked about, also had to be pretty coy. For Leonard, for instance, and a key plot point surrounding Furiai. The Japanese script was equally oblique. I mean, I kind of got it in the English version. It's sort of, penny drop moment. That's where they were going. And they were also pretty blunt about Ariosh, who was also approached in a somewhat oblique way, and they pulled no punches when it came to Seri and Mana. It was very clear what was going on there. So it's an interesting case of the localization, as opposed to Lightning Returns, where it negatively impacted the story. Here it just created a different flavour of story, a different kind of story approach, story atmosphere. It made it a lot more traditional fantasy. But considering what Drakengard / Nier is, that's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, as Accord would say,
Time doesn't always flow in a single direction.
Now that's my rant out the way, I'm going to talk about stuff that I've been doing and stuff that I will be doing. Obviously, my second book, Lostation Cersei, came out in July, and I took part in a LGBTQI+ focused book con, sci-fi fantasy con. It was called Rainbow Space Magic, and they have a Facebook post, they have an X account, a Twitter account if you still want to go to that cesspool, and they've also got a YouTube channel where they upload VODs from their sessions. I not only partook in the Sunday readings, and there were some great other people there in the readings. You've got to check them out. But I also took part with Jessica Lucci, E.M. Anderson and Antonia Aquilante in a panel called The Power of Queer Normative World Building, and it was lots and lots of fun. I'm so pleased that I was able to take part in this because it was a lot more fun than I was expecting, and for whatever reason the panel on queer normative world building is one of the more popular videos from that section. So if you want to check them out, if you want to go into not only my panels obviously but the rest of the panels, please do check them out. Also, the other people in the reading I did on Sunday: Elle Ayer, Michael G. Williams, Alex Washu, Tucker Lieberman, and of course Antonia and Lucci at the end. It was lots of fun. I think I overran, but then overrunning was kind of a thing that happened on the con, so no excuses. And this coming October I am going down to BristolCon. I don't know whether I'll be doing anything there, but I know it's almost certainly going to be a huge amount of fun. If anyone wants to, I don't know, see if they can find me, go to a place I've been. It sounds weird when you're not doing anything there, whether you don't know you're not doing anything, but you know, it's that. Also, I know that I haven't been particularly regular or efficient with things like these uploads, but life has been getting in the way. I think that's true for a lot of us over the past several years, that life has just found ways of getting in the way. Adjusting to a new social media distribution since I decided to leave Twitter after a certain completely out of touch millionaire thought he could understand what was going on in Britain better than the British could. Insert expletives here. I had to carry on with writing after a multiple month-long stretch of writer's block. I was carrying on with my OU degree, my Open University degree. I'm about to start the second part of it, literally in a few weeks, in less than 2 weeks actually. So I didn't have as much time for this as I did before, and also I am still recovering from a cavalcade of illnesses and misfortunes that struck me over the 6 months between September 2023 and February to March 2024. It was a rough period. Anyway, I hope that anyone who decides to listen to this finds this entertaining. I will do my best to do something. I am planning to do a sort of, not live commentary, I don't have the nerve for that yet, but a sort of recording myself playing a lovely little game called Europa. It's an indie game and I've played the demo. It looks so much fun, and yeah, I sincerely hope that everyone remains well. Also, shout out to Emily Inkpen. The third season of her dark sci-fi radio podcast series, The Next Legacy, is up on Kickstarter. It recently broke the halfway mark. If we can make it a reality for her, it will be wonderful, because I mean, it's an award-winning podcast, so there is quality, and stuff I've experienced of hers, she's a nice new sci-fi voice. So that's everything I can think of for this episode, and yeah, stay well, enjoy. If you want to check out my other content, please do. If you want to follow me on my socials, please do. I'm on BlueSky, Threads, Instagram and Facebook. If you want to find my website or have a look at my books, I'll include links in the description for the YouTube version anyway. And see ya!